Alright, before we get started, let me apologize for the perfect storm that occurred yesterday. Typically on my days off, I am in my room, I have the computers, and I can actually give the lesson like I need to. Unfortunately, yesterday, we were not in my room. Well, some of you were in my room, but because both classes weren't in the room, it wouldn't have been fair. But like I said, hopefully you got something out of that yesterday. I did try to introduce you to two of the main topics that you needed to know. And again, as long as you did that, today should be very easy, and I'm going to try to get to this video quickly so you can go ahead and get to your homework. Again, we just spent the whole chapter learning how to do what we call rate of change. Other times we call it a common difference. I think we learned how to take values from a table and determine the amount of change between points. So looking back for a moment, what we learned to do was to look and say that this is moving up by 6 and this is moving up by 2. And so what we did was we said if this took 6 steps by the time this took 2, I believe there were some questions where we had to do some, thought and say, well, 6 divided by 2 is 3, and then we would say this moves up by 9, and this moves up by 3, and so therefore 9 divided by 3 is also 3. If you learn how to do that process, or if you got used to at least using a table, then you're already set for finding slope. So the essential question is, what's the difference between rate of change and slope? And the answer is nothing. The problem is set up differently, and you only actually need 2 points to find rate of change or slope, however they say it, but you follow a very similar process. Slope and rate of change are synonymous, which means it's the same thing. I guess that's what that tells you. We'll learn some more technical, specific ideas relating to slope, so open your minds for a new perspective, but there is no need to worry. Again, the reason we took that test so fast is because Chapter 4 is not really like a lot of the other chapters stand on their own, and Chapter 4 really does not. It's like a little brother or sister to Chapter 5. So a lot of the stuff that you just did is going to be repeated again in this section, except for the x squared stuff. The slope formula is m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, and I don't put all of them because I think you have the common sense to recognize that if y2 means the second y, that y1 means the first y, that if x2 means the second x, then x1 means the first x. Again, you also had the notes yesterday to kind of explain that to you. This is the official formula again, but it must be memorized. There are certain formulas that whenever you go to the next class you have to know, and this is one of those. You need it actually for the rest of your lives. I don't know how to explain that, but again, just make sure you know it, because whenever something comes up, there's not going to be a reminder about slope or rate of change formula. So real quick, how it works is you would start with your m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1 if you were finding the slope of the line passing through 2 points. You have this as your x, and some of you who have issues might want to do that. Put your x and y there because it does go xy, xy. First point, second point, so y2 would be 31. First point, y1 is 7, because again, this is my second y versus my first y. This is my second x minus my first x, and from there again we do 31 minus 7, which is 24. 10 minus 4, which is 6, which means your slope of this is 4. But the same problem in a familiar way, again, the way that you're going to actually do it today, at least in a lot of the questions. Now after today you don't have to do it this way, but for now, for today, what you're going to do is you are going to take these 2 points and just simply transfer them. So 4, 7, and 10, 31. And then you really don't need the formula anymore. I mean, you'll type it into certain questions. I think there's 4 or 5 questions I'll give you where you have to type in the formula. But really all you have to do then is y2 minus y1, which is 31 minus 7, x2 minus x1, which is 10 minus 4. It will help if you do it on paper, or at least if you get a pattern, because the faster you get the pattern, the less you need the formula itself. Either way, again, that's 24 over 6, which is 4. Again, it's great to know this, but as long as you understand some sort of pattern on this while you do it, everything else will go. Again, either of those methods is okay with me. I'm sure future teachers are just going to be more concerned that you can find the correct slope than how you do it or whether or not you use the formula. Your job is just to pick a strategy and master it. Now, of course, as I said, today you are going to have to use the box form, but after you use the box form, I think the box form still makes you use the formula. So if you don't want to create the table, then that's fine after today. But today I do want to make sure you at least get that part. Again, the computer is going to make you show work. Be sure to use the second y and second x first, otherwise it's not going to work. Also be sure to use parentheses, so don't type -3 minus -6. You want to type -3 minus parentheses -6, and that way it'll actually it'll recognize what you're doing. Overall, the three ways to identify slope. The first is to find the slope of 2 points, which we kind of talked about there. The second is the slope of the equation, which is easy enough to do because if the formula is y equals mx plus b, slope is obviously 8. That is the easy one. And the third is find the slope of an actual line. To find the slope of an actual line, you actually have to memorize the phrase, which is m is equal to rise over run. And that's pretty easy to know because rise is the letter y, which goes that way. Run is the letter x, which goes that way. Again, on your graphing, y goes up and down, so it makes sense that your y's rise. Also, you can see how those two rhyme, and that your x, because it goes that way, is your run. And then in this phrase, you can go up or down, but it only goes to the right. Underline that, highlight that, because you need to make sure you never forget that. Run only goes to the right. I know I drew 2 arrows, but you will only run to the right in this book or in this year. This means you'll have to practice the skill to find consistent success. So some real quick examples on what's going to go on. These are actually from what the computer will give you at some point, so you can get your practice. It's going to ask you 3 things. And the first thing it's going to ask you is the rise. The first thing you want to do is make sure you always start at the leftmost point. So go ahead and circle your leftmost point. And it's going to say, what's the rise? Well, the rise from the leftmost point is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And you went down, so your rise is going to be -7. Your run from here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So your slope, being rise over run, is -7 over 6. And that is all. Again, on the other one, start from your leftmost point, so circle it for the sake of your notes so you understand that that's always where you're going to start, because otherwise, notice which way I have to run, and you always want to run to the right. So again, your rise here is 1, 2, 3. Your run is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Let's put equals so we don't confuse it for a negative. And your slope is 3 over 9, but of course you won't want to put 3 over 9 because it'll mark you wrong. You need to reduce your fractions or simplify your fractions. That'll be 1/3. There are 3 tricky problems in this section that you need to look out for, because hopefully you got the majority of the slope stuff done. And if you look, you'll notice that this is counting by 2, 4, 6, 8, which means when you do your steps, I do not recommend that you count the same way. Notice here this was counting by 1, and so we were able to go 1, 2, 3, 4. But this is counting by 2s, which means you want to actually count in halves as you count by 1. So when it asks for your rise, you want to go 1, 2, 3. Notice I'm going in half. 4, 5. And the tricky part again is your run is also counting by 2, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And so your slope is -5 over 7, not 1, 2. Like some people are going to put like 2.5 over 3.5, which you don't want to do that. Alright, so again, the first tricky problem is make sure you pay attention to the counting scale of that every single time. Otherwise, it's probably going to catch you up a little bit. And again, if you run into trouble, just let me know. I'll be glad to help you out. And you also have 2 different types of lines, one horizontal, one vertical. You notice in this case that your rise is 0 and your run is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And so your slope is 0 over 6, which equals, give me 1 second. And so if you do your calculator, this is the reason why I paused the video for a moment. If you saw a calculator just randomly appear, 0 divided by 6, your calculator tells you is 0. But again, this is because your rise is 0 and your run goes across. On the second or the third tricky problem, your rise is 1, 2, 3. And notice how there's a problem because we don't know where the leftmost point is, but we're just going to go with 3. Your run is 0 because it does not go sideways, which means your slope is 3 over 0. Now, 3 divided by 0 in your calculator says divide by 0 error. That is because it's hard to divide. You cannot divide something into groups of 0 because group of 0 means it doesn't exist, and we obviously know that there are 3 of those. This is undefined. Alright, now I'm going to give you a real quick way to do this, and then I'm going to get out of your way. Slope of 0 exists because I can stand on a line that looks like this, and if I walk on this, I don't go any higher or any lower, so therefore it makes sense that I am not rising at all. You can also think of slope as being positive here, negative here, and 0 right here, and 0 is in between all positives and negatives. But this line here you cannot stand on. That is a wall. If you're standing on this wall, you're more likely falling down. And so therefore you cannot stand on this, which is why it doesn't exist as an option for you when it comes to slope. Alright, so study that, write that down, whatever you need, but you will see those questions when it counts. Practice these skills to do your best to finish the homework today. This week is your toughest in terms of new information, but keeping up to speed is going to allow you to actually study. I think you're starting to understand my statement about the difference between doing homework and studying material. I hope so. If not, you might want to figure out that doing one will get you 100% in homework and 50% on a test. The other one will, put you in a spot where math won't be a challenge anymore. So I'm trying to help you learn how to master math, and unfortunately the easiest or the best way for me to teach you how to master math is to allow you to make mistakes along the way. So go ahead and go to your homework. Again, make sure you get assistance from your classmates, assistance from me. You should get a majority of your work done here, and then that way you can just do a little bit of studying of the notes when you go home. Alright, good luck.